Sarah.
Hey, Erica, good to see you.
I am so excited to talk to you. I have to tell you, I've been following you for a while and you have a podcast. I often meet people who are like, why would you have someone who has a podcast on? I'm like, because it's like, do you watch different TV shows? Yes, of course I would have someone on, but you do so much. And I fangirl a little bit because I'm like, wow, you're like my inspiration. So before we get
Oh, thank you.
started, you know what? I mean it though, because I'm like, wow, I need to be more like her. So
Oh man.
anyway, so let me introduce you and then we'll just get started. Today I've got my little notes here. We have Sarah Lorenzini. Did I say that right?
Nailed it.
I knew it. I was just in Italy this summer. So anyway, you started out in the ER, you went to the cardiac ICU, and then now you're doing rapid response. Is that accurate?
That's the short version of a long story. Yes, it is.
Well, we're going to get into the longer version here. You have your master's of science in nursing and education. You have your CCRN. You have your CEN. You've taught PALS, ACLS, NRP, and then you've spoken at several nursing symposiums. And then you're the host of this podcast. It's called Response RN, where you share real life stories from the front lines of nursing. And then I think you talk about other things. And I love it so much. I think you have a course. You have a pretty big Instagram following. You have 5 kids.
I
And
do.
Sarah, you're busy.
A bit, yes, but it's all things I love, so no complaints.
So you've accomplished so much. So thank you so much for coming on. And I wanted to start out by introducing you, but then I want to go back, because the whole point of my podcast is we're all basic nurses. We all started in nursing school and then we've gone on in a million different directions. So tell us, how did you even get interested in nursing?
Okay. So we'll have to go way back for that one because my whole life I told everybody I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up. I've always loved helping and making people feel better. When I was little, I wore a fanny pack with band-aids in it all the time because you never know when somebody might need a band-aid and Neosporin, and I was ready for it. Always loved helping people. And I've always been very academically, I did well. And so it just made sense that I would be a doctor, right? On the TV shows, the doctors are the ones that did all the helping. So in
Right.
high school, I was like, I'm a volunteer at the hospital and see some doctors in action. And I did.
Uh-huh.
And I remember naively asking the nurse, hey, so like when do the doctors come and like take care of the patients? Like when do they come and like give them their medicine, change their dressings, teach them about their diagnosis? Like when do the doctors come and like doctor? And she just started laughing. I mean, like obviously sweetly, but like, oh my gosh, this little 15-year-old girl. She's like, sweetheart, the doctors already came and went before you got here. They've already done their rounds. It's the nurses that do that. The nurses provide care to the patients 24/7. We are the ones that give the medicine. We're the ones that teach about the diagnosis. We're the ones that hold their hands through this process.
Yeah.
And I was like, no freaking way. That's not how it is in the movies.
So Grey's Anatomy, that's not
So,
ER.
so from that point on, I started kind of watching the nurses
Yeah.
and like following them around, not just waiting to see doctors do their thing. And I watched the nurses. I'm like, oh my gosh, they know so much. They do way more than white butts. They like know about all these medicines. They have so much knowledge about the patient's diagnosis. They're so compassionate. And then it occurred to me, oh my gosh, what I actually want to do is be a nurse. Like, doctor, that's awesome. I respect the field so much. And I probably could have been a doctor, but I would not want to be spread so thin. I'd love that nurses get the opportunity to care for patients, that you have this assignment of people who are like given into your care to literally care for them.
Wow.
And so it was a big shift for me to be like, okay, actually, I don't want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse.
Yeah.
Nothing against doctors. I want to be a nurse.
Right.
And then I thought I wanted to be a midwife because that's cool. Um,
For
so I went to
some,
nursing
that
school.
has never been my interest.
I went to nursing school with the intent of being a midwife, I'll be honest
Okay.
with you, or like labor and delivery nurse, something like that.
Yeah.
But I got a job in the ER as a nurse tech, like a nurse assistant,
Okay.
while in nursing school. And I chose ER just because it has everything. I thought it'd be a good training as a nursing student. And I fell in love with taking care of patients and their families on the worst day of their life, like in crisis. I love being there for people in that time. I think people assume, oh, ER nurses are just a bunch of adrenaline junkies. And that's not actually what drew me to the ER at all. It's just the opportunity to be with people who are having a really, really hard time. I've always felt drawn to that. I rise to that occasion, whether it's my friend or someone on the side of the road. I always love being there in those moments.
Yeah.
And so straight out of nursing school at the ripe old age of literally 19 years old, I graduated nursing school because of dual enrollment in high school. And the ER hired me as a brand new grad. So I started as a new grad in the ER. I know, it's crazy. Loved the ER. I learned, oh my gosh, so much to learn as an ER nurse. All my friends are working at like Chick-fil-A in the mall. And I'm like, yeah, I work night shift in the ER on Friday night. Very different. I quickly became, preceptor, charge nurse. So I'm the charge nurse at 20 years old, and I can't even drink alcohol legally yet, and I'm in charge. I love the ER so much. And I found that I enjoyed teaching people about ER nursing just as much as I loved actually doing it. So I went to school to get my master's degree in nursing education. In grad school, all my professors are like, you need to branch out of the ER. There's more out there besides ER nursing. And so I went and worked in the cardiac ICU. Loved cardiac ICU. I learned so much. I really geek out about all the gadgets and the gizmos and the hemodynamics and all the extra numbers you get to keep track of as ICU nurses. So love that. Then I was asked to be on the rapid response team at the hospital I worked at the time, which is like the perfect mix of ER and ICU. So I did that for a bit. And then I finally finished that darn master's degree. And I was offered a job as a nursing professor. And I was like, you know what? That sounds nice. I got all these kids. It'd be nice to be on the same schedule as them as a nursing professor. And so I did that for a whopping 1 year. I loved the students. I loved teaching, but I missed being a bedside nurse.
Yeah.
And so then the charge nurse from when I was a new grad ended up being the director of the ER, the local ER. And he reached out to me and asked if I would be the ER educator. I was like, okay, let's do that. I was the ER educator for 5 years. I loved being the ER educator. And then COVID hit. And that's when I was like, as much as I love teaching, I am sick and tired of teaching about PPE and COVID and donning and doffing of your, I wanted to be in the trenches with the staff like all the time. Yeah. And the hospital that I currently work at the time did not have a dedicated rapid response team. It was just like when a rapid response is called, the ICU charge nurse would leave the ICU and go to the rapid response. I'm like, we can't do that anymore. I mean, COVID, everybody's sicker. Patients in the ICU are sicker. Patients on the floor are sicker. Like, we need a dedicated team that just does emergencies. And so I went to leadership of my hospital and asked if I could start the rapid response team. And they let me. And so I got to start this thing. This is my baby, and build it from the ground up. I built it what it is today. I got to hire some of the best nurses that I know to be on this team. And so we not only respond to emergencies, we also work hard to prevent them through proactive rounding, through teaching, through pulling the Muse score. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do to look and find patients before they're crashing. And we've seen great outcomes for the patients with regards to decreased code blues in the hospital. So super proud of that. Anyway, so all that to say, I switched into this rapid response nurse role once again and left the educator. And then I was like, well, now I miss being an educator. And so my husband's like, honey, you can still be an educator. Why don't you start a podcast? And I literally laughed because, like, me, seriously, I'm like the least tech savvy person. Like, I am a grandmother with regards to how to use my cell phone or anything technology. I have to get my kids to help me. I'm terrible. Yeah. I'm like, where am I going to record? We have no extra space. I don't have an office, whatever. I decided to do it. I started recording in my closet, literally a closet with like jackets and coats. You're in your closet
now.
Just well, so this is the remodeled one, but yes, it started as just a tiny closet.
Okay.
So just me with like a $15 microphone from Amazon, and so I started the podcast with the goal of just taking real cases, like real patient experiences I had, telling the story because I learned so well through stories, and then following it up with breaking down the pathophysiology, the pharmacology, and the nurse's important role in responding to that emergency. Because I found as a rapid response nurse, I wanted to teach nurses after the emergency, but often there's no time. They got to get back to documenting. I got to go to the next emergency. So this was an opportunity for me to like give back to my profession and use the teaching that I love so much to help not just nurses at my hospital, but maybe more nurses would listen. I didn't know. And it took off.
When did you start? What year?
So I started in October of 2020.
Okay.
But it was more like a hobby at first. Like, I would do an episode, and then like 2 months later I'd do an episode, and then like a month later. So it wasn't very consistent. But once I started doing them more consistently, more and more people were finding the podcast, and nurses from like Australia and Canada and Africa are like reaching out to me like, I love your podcast. I listened to episode 21 and I knew exactly what to do with my patient. Like I had the same patient in real life and I was so helpful. And I was like, this is so freaking cool. I could have never helped a nurse in Australia just being the ER educator in Florida, right? But I had the opportunity to help more nurses. And so anyways, it kind of just has evolved faster than I can keep up with. It's grown a lot. I have like 45,000 downloads a month.
What?
Yeah, I know. Like, who are these people? I don't know. How do they find my podcast? I don't know. But I feel just privileged that nurses are willing to listen to my stories and that they've been able to help so many people. So that's the story of how I ended up being a podcaster. But it was never my intent to grow up and be a podcaster one day.
Well, how long did it take you? Because I think this is important for other people to hear, and for me to hear, actually. When you start something, you hear that no one's going to be an overnight success. You have to stay with it. But everyone's secretly wishing that it would just take off.
Right?
Even though you know that, you're like, but maybe, because it happens for some people, maybe could happen for me. How long did it take you from inception of the idea to where you feel like it really took off?
Probably 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, because at Christmas time 2021,
Yeah.
no, 2022, excuse me. So yeah, 2 years in, I was like, this is actually something. Like I have a pretty good amount of people that are listening. I decided that in 2023 I was going to be consistent rather than just like, oh, I have time this weekend, I'll record something.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to put out a podcast every single Friday.
Okay.
And once you say that, I'm going to start doing podcasting. I'm going to have a new episode every Friday. It kind of holds you accountable. Like I have to actually make this thing.
The people are waiting.
Yeah, because people are like, oh yeah, every Friday I got a new episode of Rep Response RN.
Yeah.
So the accountability of saying I was going to do that. I purchased a course to like learn how to be a better like course creator and content producer because I know nothing. I know nothing about marketing. I know nothing about entrepreneurship. Like I'm a really, really good nurse. I know PathoPhys really good. I'm confident in that. But when it comes to like tech and marketing and social media, it's just not my jam. And I was like, well, the thing is, I can continue to make excuses of like, oh yeah, I'm not good at that stuff.
Yeah.
And then that means less nurses will actually find this podcast and I can help less people. Yeah. But if I can like hunker down and learn the stuff that I don't actually enjoy, if I can learn to do it well, that means more nurses can find the podcast. More nurses can be equipped to handle emergencies, and that's going to help more patients. That was kind of like my driving factor. So in January of 2023, I made the commitment every Friday, and I did it. Every Friday in 2023, I had a new episode. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you it was easy. That meant many late nights, staying up until midnight and trying to finish an episode and get it out and, editing and writing the copy. I mean, all the stuff it's very hard. But my motivator, what kept me going was all those messages from nurses saying, thank you so much for episode 35. It helped me with my patient, or it was so inspiring, or it helped me get through a rough shift, or whatever the thing was. That's kind of what inspired me. It definitely was not like I wanted to be famous. I don't care at all if you even know what my name is. But if my story helped you be a better nurse, that really inspires me to keep going. So I would say the first 2 years was like, meh. I kind of was doing it as a hobby. And last year I was like, that's it. I'm going to get this in the hands of more nurses. I have to buckle down and be consistent. Consistency makes a big difference. Yeah. And also just learning kind of like the tools to navigate Instagram and to navigate how to get yourself out in the hands of more people. So
right.
That's that.
Well, Sarah, there's so much to discuss here because this podcast is about demonstrating to other nurses. It's about helping nurses, but in a different way. It's demonstrating to nurses what is possible for them. What is possible? Because a lot of nurses, I'm sure you know them, they get into one specialty, they get burned out, but they don't know what else to do. Mm-hmm. Well, last year we had, what did I have? 49 episodes. Here's 49 ideas of other things that you can do using your nursing degree. And so I wanted to have you on because you're many of those things. And I've had many guests on who say that nurses make the best entrepreneurs. And why? Because we figure it out. It is our job as nurses to figure it out and make it happen. So the doctor puts in an order. If it either makes sense or say it doesn't make sense, it's my job to go back and say, what does this mean? Because I know the patient. Did you mean to order this? Okay, you did. Well, then let me educate me, and then we go educate the patients. And then sometimes the orders are difficult and you have to get your resources, you have to get help, or you have to educate others. But nurses are just good at figuring it out. And so when you say you started this podcast, you weren't techie and you didn't know this, you didn't know that, but you made a commitment to figuring it out. And so
Yeah.
just want other nurses to hear that you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to be committed to finding out how to do it. So thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. And I hope it encourages nurses that hear this. Something else I want to highlight. I don't know, you probably didn't. So last in December, there's two nurses that started Stat PD Marketplace. Have you seen them on Instagram?
Mm-mm.
Well, it's okay. So they sell, people can sell, nurses can sell like digital products that they've come up with. If they were in education and they have some report sheet or a nursing home policies and procedures. They live in rural areas, like rural Iowa, and one I think is in Nebraska. One has cows. I mean, they live in a town of 200, but the internet has opened all sorts of opportunities for nurses.
Okay.
But she worked an hour away and she was doing all of this education stuff. So she went to her leadership and said, hey, you have enough stuff here where you need an educator, for the ER, for the hospital, for nurses, new nurses orientation. And they made the job. So kind of like what you just said, you went to your leadership and said, hey, we need a rapid response team. And these are all of the reasons why. And they did it. They did it. And I think that is so cool. Did you have any qualms about saying, hey, we need to go to the leadership and ask? Did they give you any pushback?
Oh, of course. You think it was that easy? No way. Of course. Because it's expensive. The more
Right.
resources you ask for, it's expensive for a hospital, and a hospital's a business too. So I had to kind of speak their language. Like, if they think, okay, we're just going to have to hire someone else to do the same thing that the ICU charge nurse has been able to do just fine, then why would we do that? No, I had to say, I had to pull the data and be like, the charge nurse is off the floor this many hours per shift. That's affecting patient care in the ICU. The staff nurses are afraid to call rapid responses because they don't want to bother the ICU charge because they know that they have other important things to do in the ICU. This is bad for culture. You're going to lose nurses, and that's where you start getting to their bank account, right? So I had to lay out all the data and kind of sell it to them for them to say, yes, okay, we can do that. And it wasn't just yes, here's all the FTEs you need. It was yes, we'll hire just you and you alone. And you can pull the data and show that you're valuable. And then once you can prove that to us, we'll give you more FTEs. And that's how that went. So I worked rapid response as the lone rapid response nurse for the whole hospital from August until November. And they finally gave me an FTE. And I hired Marissa, who was the nurse of the year, the best nurse in the hospital.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. Anyways, yes, it definitely takes time. Again, other thing, I also hate data and statistics. I like reading it, but pulling it in math is not my thing. But if you ever listen to an autobiography or anything about Florence Nightingale?
No, I haven't.
She's fascinating. Okay, so this lady, back whenever women were low in society, she was the one that came up with the data that showed hand washing as a must. Because before, they didn't wash hands. And so she's trying to tell the doctors, listen, you have to wash your hands between patients. You're spreading infection. You're contaminating the other soldiers. And they're no, we wiped our hands off. It's fine. I wiped the blood off. And she's saying, no, you have to use soap and water and wash your hands before. So no one's listening to her. So she pulled the statistics and pulled the data to prove to them that hand washing is a must. And they still didn't listen. So then she's well, if y'all are going to listen, I'm going to send it to the journalists. So she drew out the most gorgeous pie charts to prove her point. If you ever Google them, they are beautiful. This is before there's Excel spreadsheets and stuff. This is hand-drawn pie charts. She sent this data to the journalist and said, please publish this because our soldiers are dying in the battlefield because the doctors aren't washing their hands. And then the world got a hold of it what? These doctors need to wash their hands. Look at this data. Anyways, I was inspired by Florence Nightingale, who's the founder of modern nursing, because she was this is work to pull the data, but it's going to save lives. And so it was work for me to pull the data to prove we needed a rapid response team, but I know it's going to help patients. So I'm willing to put in the hours of figuring out how to use darn Excel, which I hate Excel, and figuring out how to pull this information and how to turn Excel into a bar graph. Again, nothing I learned in nursing school, but everything's figure outable. There's always YouTube videos to learn how to do Excel. There's always YouTube videos on how to use a microphone and how to edit a podcast. Like, I spent so many hours learning how to do things that I was never taught in school because I needed the knowledge to do what's best for whoever, my family, my friend, my patients, whoever it is. Yeah, everything's figure outable.
Oh my gosh. I think that's Marie Forleo, isn't it? Do you follow Marie Forleo?
I do. Yeah, I love her. She's super inspirational.
Yes, so much so. I am going to look up. You said that's in her autobiography, or who, do you remember who the author
If you
was?
just like Google Florence Nightingale pie chart, I'm sure you'll find the images for it. But I was reading that, I was like, you know what? If she could do this before there's Excel and like in the middle of the Crimean War, I'm sure I can figure out how to pull data enough to prove to my hospital we need a
She
rapid
did it
response
before
team.
Excel. Well, but I mean, that's to your credit, Sarah, because a lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people wouldn't do that work. And you did, but I think it encourages other nurses to say, hey, if you see a need and it's an actual need, okay, you're going to have to put some work in. You're going to have to find some data, and you can make changes.
Sure.
I love that idea. So now you're still working clinically, is that right?
I am. Yeah. So
What is a typical, how does your schedule look doing all of it?
my mom life, work life,
Yeah.
podcaster life schedule look. Okay.
Yes, I think people
So
know.
currently I work Monday through Thursday at the hospital. I'm the leader of the team. So I work like 9-hour shifts, I would say.
Okay.
And then I take off every Friday to work on the podcast. And now I have an online membership, like a community. So all the like business side and the recording and the prepping and the editing of the podcast, I have to squeeze all that into Friday. And then also like in the evenings after I get my kids to bed.
Okay.
My goal, to be honest with you, is to work part-time in the hospital. I never want to leave. I actually really like the bedside.
Yeah.
But I would love to do like 2 12s a week and have a couple more days to work on the business.
Huh.
Not because I don't like bedside nursing, but because I really like my kids and they're only going to be in my house for so long. And the Fridays that I'm home, my kids love Fridays because I'm there in the morning when they wake up. I can make a breakfast. We do like just more special stuff that I don't have time for on a regular day when I'm rushing off to work. Even in the evenings, it feels less rushed because I can start dinner earlier and just have time to kind of like relax with them rather than like, all right, like go. I gotta get home. I gotta change out of my scrubs. I gotta hop in the shower. I gotta make dinner. Like, you know how busy life is. So I would love to have a couple more days. So I recently started a new thing, like brand new. December 1st, I started it. It's called Rapid Response Academy, the heart and science of caring for the sick.
What is it?
In the academy, it's basically like podcast 2.0. So a podcast is free. All 87 episodes that I have out are free. But this is where I put in a little bit more time to go deeper. Every Friday, I go live in the community and I teach about a topic, a nursing topic, and we alternate between the science of nursing topics. So like pathophysiology, pharmacology, like last week we talked about hemodynamics 101. And then we alternate and do the heart of nursing, which is where I talk about some of the softer side of nursing that is also just as important to be a good nurse. So like leadership, advocacy, like all of those things that I want nurses to know as well. You know, how to navigate goals of care discussions and how to call the doctor and how to advocate when the doctor is being a jerk and how to stand up for your teammate if there's a bully on the floor, like all that kind of stuff. You know, navigating difficult family dynamics with patients. I mean, that's just as important as understanding the medication you're giving. And so every other week I go live. I have right now about 50 nurses in that membership. And it is so awesome. It's like all my favorite things into one thing. Like I love being an educator and teaching people like one-on-one. And I love the podcast, but the downside of the podcast is it's just me talking on a microphone by myself, and I'm a people person. So in this community, I get to like teach live to these nurses in these live sessions. And there's a community aspect where nurses can like go on and throw up a question they have or share a win they've had or share a story and get feedback. Like it just makes my heart so happy to see nurses from literally all over the world, like not just our country, from all over the world, from ER to ICU to oncology to rapid response, like all types of nurses that are in this thing, supporting each other, answering the questions, giving wisdom, giving motivation, giving encouragement. Like it really is beautiful. So I'm very grateful for this. If I can get enough nurses in this membership, then I can go part-time at the hospital. But for right now, I'm still working my butt off, hustling, doing my 3 jobs: podcast life, mom life, and also rapid response nurse life. But I love them all. Just there's only so many hours in the day, as you know.
Well, I'm glad you said it. So is this a course or it's a membership or is it a combo sort of thing?
It's like a monthly subscription.
Okay.
So every month, when you pay the subscription, you get access to these Friday live teachings, and
Okay.
then they're all recorded. So they're like archived. You can go back and listen to them again if you missed some stuff, or if you weren't able to show up on Friday. The archive episodes, you can watch them on double speed if you want to like fly through it, or you can slow it down and pause it and take notes or whatever.
Right.
But it really is good content. Like, I'm not just saying that. I put a lot of time into making the slides for it, so it's valuable to the nurses, taking their feedback as to what they really want to learn about. I have a whole curriculum built out. And the thing is, it's stuff that I've taught on before. I was an ER educator for 5 years. It's
Right.
just now formulated in a way for this particular medium of education. So it's not just like me at the bedside teaching a nurse. It's like almost like a big Zoom conference call where I get to, speak to the camera, but also hear their questions and clarify points that I, you know, breeze through. I'm going to slow it down a little bit if I need to, but yeah, it's been really, really awesome. I'm loving this. So yeah, I don't know where it's going to go, but we'll see. I just started in December, and we'll see how it takes off.
I love this so much. So I have a friend, she does she's a forensic nurse. So she
Cool.
has courses on in that sort of vein, sexual assault nursing, forensic nursing. She has one on photography, the female exam. I think she has one on male exams as well. But her thing is she wants to make education that's clinically useful because there's a ton of education in that world and in any world in nursing where you're like, okay, these are words, but I need to talk to someone. I need like stuff that I'm actually going to see and be able to talk it through with someone. So it sounds like your membership, that's the place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, like the stuff that I teach, nurses could find somewhere else. There's textbooks already written on critical care nursing, on ER nursing, on managing critical patients. Like, you can go read a textbook. But at
Yeah.
least the way I learn so much better with someone talking to me and with me, so I can actually ask questions and like clarify, did I actually understand that? There's something beautiful too about learning in community. Like in nursing school, I always had a study group that I was learning with. It's
Yeah.
just more motivating when you're all learning the same thing together rather than just like me by myself, my textbook. I mean, you can do it. It's just hard to like actually get the knowledge in your head.
Yeah.
Additionally, I learned so much better with stories, like actual patient scenarios. Like, you can tell me all you want about, I don't know, an example, a STEMI. Tell me all STEMIs. I can recognize them on the EKG, great. But until you see that STEMI patient, that exact scenario, they're pale, they're diaphoretic, you can see the changes on the monitor, you can watch them go into VTAC, then it's stuck in my head forever. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of my preferred method of teaching, is through stories. Every episode of the podcast is stories. Whenever I teach these live sessions, at the end of like the pathophys didactic stuff, I have like 5 or more case studies where we kind of walk through it together. Here's how the patient evolved. Here's what their labs were. Here's how their vital signs were. What would you do with this? Because that's how the critical thinking really gets like cemented into your mind. It's not just like, oh, I understand the concept of ST segment elevation, but like
Right.
the actual clinical picture of the patient and where to go from here and what's your first priority. And so I'm very grateful that I get to take all these years of experience and all these crazy stories that I've encountered and use it to help other nurses and their future patients.
Well, I'm a big advocate for people having mentors. And you're basically their mentor.
Yeah. And
Where
I love that. It's a privilege.
yes, you read all of these things in the books, you can find this stuff anywhere, but you need a mentor. You're like, what? What am I supposed to do with this? And you say, okay, here's a story. Let's talk through this case study. You read about STEMI, but this is what it actually looks like. This is what you're actually going to do. Here's an example. And you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. So, anyway, I think that's really cool. So, what advice? Gosh, you have to have so much advice for nurses. I mean, how do we even start any of this? We'll start with entrepreneurs. If there's a nurse out there who wants to start something and they don't know how to do it, like you didn't know how to do it, what is your biggest piece of advice for that nurse?
Okay. I can't say biggest. I have a couple.
Okay, yes.
Don't start something just to make the money. Choose something you are passionate about, that you truly enjoy, that you think is really important.
Yeah,
And that's what's going to drive you to keep going when it gets hard. Because
yeah,
money is really not that big of a motivator, especially when it's not coming in at the beginning. But
yeah,
if you're like, this needs to happen for nurses, or I want to help this niche of people, I think the want to help, the drive to make a difference will carry you through those late nights, the challenges of trying to like fumble through the tech or the marketing or whatever. But if you're just trying to make money out of it, you're going to burn out, because that's not fun either. So I would say whatever you choose, don't just choose the easy low hanging fruit that seems like an easy way to make quick money. Choose something you're like, actually, well, I want to make a difference in that area, that will guide you through. Yeah. And the second thing is, when you start, you're going to suck. Just be prepared for that. If you listen to my early podcast, it's a little bit cringy because I did not know what I was doing, trying to put things together. Oh my gosh, the quality of the audio is just terrible. But I just had to start. And it still is just as helpful to nurses, even if the quality is not as like amazing as it is today, you know? So just start, and you will learn along the way. Think about in nursing school, you learned all the things in the classroom. You were not good your first patient. Like, you weren't as confident, you weren't as organized. Like, it took several times to be like, hi, I'm Sarah, I'm the nurse, and here's what we're doing today. When I was new, it was fumbly, it was awkward, it was rough. You have to just do it to actually get good at it. And so don't wait till you're good to start something. Just start it, and eventually you'll get good at it, or you won't, and you'll shift and pivot and find something that you're better at naturally, or that you are more passionate about. Like, it will all kind of like come to fruition eventually. Never did I imagine I would have like a membership. It didn't even cross my mind. I just wanted to make a podcast to have a chance to like tell those stories that I really felt like were valuable for the profession, and it has grown into what it is today. So who knows what your original idea will actually evolve into. Just be open to whatever the path has for you. The journey is just as good as the destination.
I love that. And people are like, oh, well, that's not, like they want more concrete advice. You're like, no, that's it. You have to start. You have to be willing to suck. You have to be willing to suck publicly. You have to, I mean, right? Because I find that I'm typically not afraid of failing. I fail all the time. I failed my sourdough starter this morning. I don't care. What I particularly don't like is failing in front of others and bracing for their reactions when I look like a fool. That is what people are afraid of. And you just have to get over it. You just have to get over it. And in spite of looking like a fool, or, me going back to my first podcast and it being cringy, or the same for you, just being like, well, that's part of my journey. And you just got to be okay with that. And it's okay, because we all suck. Don't believe any of these lies that they started out being so amazing from the start, because they.
Yeah. If you want some motivation, just scroll down to my first couple Instagram posts. You will feel so much better about yourself compared to what they are today.
So that's for nurse entrepreneurs. What about nurses? I don't know, just in general, who are starting out, they're in the hospital, they're in the weeds, they're doing the nursing thing, and let's say they're burned out, or they're questioning some of their choices. What would you say for them?
I think it's important to take some time to reflect onto what you're hating about your job right now.
Yeah.
Is it the patient care? Is it your coworkers? Is it your boss? Like, what is actually causing that in your stomach where you don't want to go to work?
Yeah.
Because you need to identify that before you can decide what your next steps are. If it's just you have a terrible boss, well, go get a job with a different boss, right? If the patient care is just too hard on your soul, then find a role that's not as much patient care. If your coworkers are just toxic and terrible, either shift the culture of your unit or get a new unit. But you don't stay stuck in a burnout spot. There's so many more options for you. Yeah. And then it's okay to start again. Like, for example, let's say you're like, I'm going to be an ER nurse. That's my goal. That's my dream. I'm going to be ER nurse. But you get there and you don't love it. Sometimes people are afraid to like shift and pivot because you told everybody you're going to be an ER nurse. Who cares? It's okay to like change things up. All forms of nursing are helping people in some way, you know? And so if you went into nursing to help, you will find a way to help in a way that fits your life, your season of life, because it's different, right? Like, the season of life that I was a nursing professor looked very different than the season of life that I'm in right now. All my kids were like in elementary school, and it's a very busy time. And it was really helpful to have the nursing professor schedule.
Yeah.
But in this season of life, I'm loving what I have currently. So it's okay to change things up. Don't be afraid to like seek out new options. Your podcast is a great resource for that kind of stuff. But yeah, you don't have to do it just because you said you would or just because you thought you would. It's okay to change. It's okay to change your mind.
I don't know where that started, Sarah. Like back in the day, back in the 40s, it was like this idea where you go to work for this one factory and that is where you stay, for the next 40 years of your life until you get your pension or retire. And
Yeah,
somehow
this like loyalty to the company stuff. That's no need for that
no,
anymore.
no need for that. But no, this is your degree. This is your license. And if you change your mind, you change your mind. And all of that knowledge that you get, it is not lost. It will make you a better nurse for whatever you choose to do next. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So, Sarah, where can people find you? Tell us where the nurses can find more about you, more about your I was going to say subscription or your membership, where they can find your education, your podcast, your website. Where can we find you?
Sure. So my podcast is Rapid Response RN. It's on all podcast platforms. My Instagram handle is the Rapid Response RN because regular Rapid Response RN was already taken, so I had to add the in front of it. And then my website is rapidresponseandrescue.com. And from there, you can learn a bunch more stuff about my membership, about my course, about my podcast, about me. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. So I have 2 different paid offerings. The first one is called Rapid Response and Rescue. It's just a 1-hour course. Again, going back to just get something out there. That was my get something out there. I was like, I need to have something that brings in income because the podcasting does not bring in income unless you're like advertising for other people.
Right.
So I was like, I'm going to make this little course and sell it. That way I can justify hiring an editor because it's a lot of work to edit these podcasts. So I made this little course. It's 1 hour long. It's just like an introduction to how to respond to a crashing patient, what your mindset needs to be, whatever. So Rapid Response and Rescue course is 1 hour. And I was like, well, that's cool. I made it. It's out there. It's selling. Okay. It's literally just enough money to pay for my editor. But once people buy it, I never get to meet this person. I never get to interact with them. So that's when I said I'm going to start the subscription because it gives me a chance to actually talk with the nurses that I'm teaching and hear what they want to learn. So that I titled Rapid Response Academy, thinking like academy is like an ongoing thing where you're learning. That's just a one-time course. Rapid Response Academy, the heart and science of caring for the sick. And that's that monthly membership, community subscription, whatever you want to call it. I'm still figured out. This is uncharted territory. I don't even know what it's going to look like at the end. I just know I love it so far. I love teaching live and I love the nurses in the community and I love watching nurses support each other. So that's what it is so far. We're a month into this. We'll see what it evolves into. So that's my things.
Yes, I'm excited to watch. I love watching nurses do their thing, try something new and putting it out there. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm going to share it with everyone and I'm going to have your IG, your website, everything in the show notes. So if anyone's listening to this or watching on YouTube, just go to the show notes and you can find Sarah from there.
Sounds good. All right, Raker, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you.
You too.
Bye-bye.